Okay, do you feel like there's a lot of people that are scared of making pie dough? And I'm here to tell you that I was once one of those people. Hey, it's Chrissy. Welcome back to my kitchen. Well, I need to tell you a little story. So a few years back, my sister brought a pie to Thanksgiving dinner, and she had bought it from a lady in her neighborhood. And I'm pretty intrigued. It looks pretty good. So I cut it, and I kid you not, it changed my life. I was like, that is a good pie. I had never tasted a crust that tasted so good. So I thought, I can do that, can't I? Well, I could, but I had no idea how many trials and errors it would take. Let's just say I was disappointed more times than I can count, but I finally got it. And now I'm here to teach you how to make life-changing pie crust and to bake it beautifully. Follow along to get all my tips, tricks, and techniques. If you break pie dough down, it's really simple. It has 4 ingredients: flour, salt, some sort of fat. I'm gonna be showing you a shortening, and water. That's it. So it's really simple ingredients. It's the technique that we use that's gonna make it be flaky and tender and so good. Now, I like to break it down a little bit further. So I do like all-purpose flour, and I love to use a little bit of cake flour. My favorite way to make pie dough is with lard. We're gonna use shortening today. Sometimes lard is a little bit harder to find a good quality, or even harder to find in general, but most grocery stores are gonna carry a good quality shortening. So we're gonna use shortening today, but you can use the same technique, and I have posted the recipe with lard in it as well. We're gonna start out by taking our mixing bowl. You know that I use a scale. It makes for less dishes, less cleanup, my kind of game. And I'm gonna stick it on the scale. I'm just gonna stick the bowl right on the scale. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tear the scale or zero it out. And if you don't know what that means, basically what happens is when you stick the bowl on the scale, it has a weight on it. And you don't want to have to do the math to figure out how much flour actually gets added onto the scale inside the bowl. So basically, I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna press. All scales have a tare button. So if you can see, it's a tare button, and you're gonna just press that, and your weight is going to go to 0. And now you can start putting things in the bowl, and it's gonna weigh it just from there. I'm gonna start with my all-purpose flour, and I'm gonna put that in first. And it just seems a little quicker for me to do this way without measuring. 1, yes, it's less mess in my eyes. And 2, it's more accurate. Whenever I bake, I use the scale. Everybody scoops different. Everybody's flour may be sitting there for a while, and if it hasn't been sifted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when you use a food scale, all of that questioning goes out the window, and you just do it right to the amount. So I added my all-purpose flour, and now I'm just gonna tare or zero out the scale again, and I'm gonna add my cake flour on top of that. Okay, now when I'm doing a small batch and I'm not doing something in a commercial kitchen or for a really big batch, I use measuring spoons to put my salt and my seasonings in, because sometimes these scales, once you put in, it's just too small of a batch to be able to weigh those small ingredients. So next I'm gonna put in my salt. When I measure salt, I just basically pour from the salt container into the measuring spoon. Make sure it's even and it's not over the rim. If you're gonna use a measuring spoon, you gotta make sure that it's done right so that you don't put too much in or not enough. Another trick that my mom taught me was to take a knife and to take the top edge, that flat edge, and just put it on and go straight across so that you get an even amount. Now that I've added those dry ingredients, I'm gonna take my mixing paddle and I'm just gonna mix the flours together and the salt, because when I mix this, I'm not gonna mix it for very long once I put the shortening in it. So I want pretty much all that flour and salt to be already mixed in. Now, if you've been watching me long, you know that I like to use gloves. I got used to using gloves in the commercial kitchen because we use gloves for everything and go through gloves boxes at a time. So now, instead of, you can use a spoon, but it's just as quick for me. Zero out the scale, again, by pushing tare or 0 on a scale. Wait for it to turn to 0, and then you can start measuring it again. You might say, like, why are you gonna use a glove and just take it off right after? And I'll show you the reason why I use a glove on this part too. After I measure everything in there, now that I've done that, I can take it off the scale so that I can work with it. What I do is I'm gonna take my hand and I'm gonna just basically fold and coat those pieces of shortening that I just put in and break them up a little bit more, putting some of the flour on top, coating all of those shortening pieces in flour. Okay, garbage. I'm gonna put the bowl on the mixer, however your mixer works. You're gonna want the very lowest setting. I've been using mine and I mix it about 30 seconds on stir. Depending on your mixer, maybe your mixer mixes really, really quick and it's very, very powerful. Well, you may not want to mix it for 30 seconds. We will start the clock. I watch it because I don't want it combined together. What I'm looking for is I'm looking for it to break up some more of those shortening pieces, but I don't want it to combine like a cookie dough. The water that we add will do that. Okay, there we go. There's 30 seconds and actually it looks great. Okay, so now I'm gonna take this off the mixer and you're not gonna believe me, but this is it for this stage. So the hardest part is, and this will make or break your pie dough. I take this off the mixer, I look at it, everything looks good. I've got some big chunks, some small. I've got some medium size, but it hasn't combined like a cookie dough. I don't want it to do that. I just want it to kind of still stay separated. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it in a plastic bag. I usually just use a gallon size Ziploc. Okay, all right, so I stick it in a gallon size Ziploc. Now I'm gonna stick this in the freezer. I know that sounds crazy, but if you put it in the freezer, it will combine better. And when I say combine better, I mean, I've tried it in the refrigerator, which works with lard. Lard is okay in the fridge, but shortening is so soft and so tender that I have found that if I put it in the fridge and then I add the water, I can't add very much water before it just combines. And you need a sufficient amount of water for the pie dough to actually be workable. If you don't add enough water, what happens is it just crumbles in your hands. And I found that they actually are more tough. You need that moisture. So if we put this in, because this has a high amount of fat in it, remember, if we put it in the freezer, when we pull it out of the freezer, it's actually gonna allow us to add a little bit more water so that it combines and then it will be much easier to work with. And the cool thing is you could actually take this mixture and put it in the freezer for quite a bit of time. And then whenever you wanted to make pie dough really quick, you could pull it out and add the water, and which we'll show you next is the next step, and we'll show you that next in the video. But hardest part, going to wait. Going to put this in the freezer. All right, we're back. You've done the hardest part, you've waited. And I usually wait overnight. Like I said, you could keep this in the freezer. As long as it doesn't get air to it, and defrost and then refrost, you're gonna be able to keep this in there for a long time. But I like it to be probably overnight. So now that we've done that, I'm gonna take our frozen bag, put it in the mixing bowl. If you have large chunks of shortening that never ever broke up, right now would be the time to break them up. I like to use a glove. So I just take it and I'm just basically going to squeeze it in my hand, some of those big pieces, so that they break up. Now, I wouldn't say a big piece is like that size. That's a great size to have in there. It's more if you have maybe something like this, a little bit bigger, and just break it. Because it's frozen, it will kind of crumble for you. Maybe this one. Now, you don't have to get all of them, just if you were to have a lot. So now I'm gonna stick our bowl back on our mixer. Add our paddle. Okay, and I usually will just hit this for maybe like, turn it on, stir that lowest setting for maybe like 10 seconds. See if there's anything that kind of comes to the surface. That was 10 seconds and it looks pretty good. Okay, so now all we have to do is add the water. I always add cold water. I actually, during the summer when it's been really hot in some of our commercial kitchens, what I'll do is I'll actually stick water in the refrigerator so that it's cold. You could put ice in your water. Because your mixture is frozen, it doesn't have to be so cold, but you don't want it lukewarm. You want it cold. And actually, I'll temp my water. That way you can measure it against what you have. I always get more water than I need because we want to add it in 2 parts. So I got my water, I temped it. This water is straight out of the fridge filter where you would get like a drink of water out of your fridge. This is 57 degrees. And then what you're gonna do is, I always get more than I need in my liquid measuring cup on the scale after zeroing it out. I'm gonna get my timer ready again. Even though you're gonna watch it, I'm just gonna let you know how long this takes. I'm gonna start it, and then basically you're gonna pour it, not slowly, pretty quickly, but you're gonna let it mix while you pour it. And then as soon as I see it kind of like, oh yeah, it's starting to come together, there's still some dry, I'm definitely gonna need some more water. I take and I'm gonna add water on the bottom. So what I like to watch for is it kind of will pull up from the bottom of the bowl. Some of those dry pieces will stay at the bottom. And so what I like to do is I like to measure out a little bit more of my water. I'm gonna pour it and I want it to moisturize that bottom part of the bowl so that I don't have to mix all in. I'm gonna start it back up. And as soon as it all comes together, you're good. You don't have to mix it like for an absorbent amount of time or anything. I mixed it for about 30 seconds. I mean, really, you're only gonna mix it just until it's come together and all the dough is moisturized. So now that it's done, I'm gonna pour it out onto a floured surface. Y'all know how much I love my wood board. I'll get the paddle stuff first. It should feel really cold. And it's pretty soft too. So we have our pie dough. Now, because it's so cold, I'm gonna be okay. It's not gonna melt. Like if it were at room temperature, if that shortening was at room temperature or even cold, just from the fridge, your hands have so much heat in them that it warms it up so quick. So basically what I'm gonna do, because if you remember, the stuff that got mixed at the top It had been mixed a little bit longer. It has a little bit more moisture in it than the stuff at the bottom, but we don't want to keep it mixing in that bowl. We want to do as little mixing as we can. We're going to do some with our hands. I basically fold it into each other, and that is our beautiful, amazing, easy pie crust, pie dough. Now, obviously this is gonna make more than one pie, and I do that on purpose. I like to kind of think ahead. So what I do is now I measure it out, and I'm gonna just break off a piece. I love doing this because when you break it off, you almost can see the layers already forming in the dough. It's actually pretty amazing how it does that. Okay, I do about 14 ounces to a pound of dough. Okay, and if I have one that has a lot less dough than the others, I just will kind of make it even. And I'll put a little bit more dough on that one. So now I have 4 pie crusts that I can make. And like I said, this is more dough than you're gonna need. I usually do my pies in a 9-inch pie pan, but I like to have that extra so that it's easy to cut out and make sure that I can make the pie crust look really good. Now that I've separated them, I roll them or I shape them in a ball. And then what I'll do is I'll flatten it. The reason why I do this is once I put it in the fridge or the freezer, I don't have to let it defrost quite as long. And then you are ready to start rolling out right away. You don't have to wait for it and then smash it. Basically, you can start working right away. I get some plastic wrap, and what I'm gonna do is I don't like to do the plastic wrap with flour underneath because the plastic doesn't stick to each other. I'm gonna take my pie dough patty, called a patty, pie dough ball patty. We're gonna make sure you pull it tight. I'm gonna roll it a couple times, and then what I'll do is I'll take those edges, push them in. So this one's ready to go. I'm gonna do the other ones as well. If I were sticking them in the freezer, I would just stick them in a plastic bag, and that's it. That is the easiest pie crust that you'll ever make. This really is amazing. I can't wait until our next video when we can roll this into a beautiful pie crust. And wait till you taste it.